Hi everyone, I'm Krista Seiden, Analytics Advocate at Google, and today I'm joined by Scott Herman, who is a Product Manager on Google Tag Manager. Thanks for joining us, Scott.
Yeah, happy to be here.
So today, Scott is going to tell us about dynamic tagging with CSS selectors in Google Tag Manager. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Scott, and we'll dive right in.
Great, thanks Krista. Yeah, so there's a lot of different ways to tag all of the things that you care about on your websites. And today I'd like to talk about one of those techniques to do things a little bit more at scale than you might be used to. So let's take a look. So here we have a demo site that I've set up. Fairly straightforward. We have some buttons, some of them are blue, some are orange. And this is really just representative of different elements that you might have on your site. And if we take a look under the covers, we'll find there's really nothing complicated going on here. It's a fairly basic site structure with a div and a bunch of buttons within it. There's no JavaScript on any of these elements or anything like that. I've also implemented Google Tag Manager as it's recommended straight out of the box. So I've copied and pasted this code directly as it's given to me when I first set up an account in Google Tag Manager. But we're not doing anything fancy here, nothing with data layers or data layer pushes for element clicks or things like that. So if I wanted to start measuring interactions with these buttons, as I've mentioned, there's a few ways I could do this. One way is that I could go in here into the code, and I could have my developers, if I were a marketer, implement code on click of each of these elements. This is not a bad way of doing things. It can be a bit more robust. As the site changes, we know that that type of measurement is still going to work. But we can do things a little bit more dynamically without putting code on the page as well. So a lot of people are familiar in Google Tag Manager with a feature that is called auto event triggers. We have triggers for things like, if we go in here, this is the Google Tag Manager interface. We have triggers for things like page loads, clicks, and other things like form submissions and whatnot. And we could set a click trigger up for every single element that we want to start measuring. But today I'd like to talk about a more dynamic approach to doing so. So one thing you'll notice here, if we look under the covers again at this website, is that all of these buttons that I want to start measuring are actually child elements of one element, of one div on the site. And the idea of that element is site sections. Now within Google Tag Manager, we can use something called CSS selectors. And CSS selectors are a feature typically used for cascading style sheets on websites for CSS. You can take a look, if you Google CSS selectors, you'll find information, for example, on W3 schools. And these are typically used to help you select particular elements that you want to apply styles to. But we've enabled these in Google Tag Manager as well for this type of dynamic tagging that we're talking about. So within Google Tag Manager, we can create a trigger, and I've already set this up here. We can create a trigger to say when a click occurs on all elements and on some clicks, when the click element here, and the match type I'm using is a special match type called matches CSS selector. And what I've done here, I've written a CSS selector. And for any of you who are not familiar with CSS selectors, this will look a bit foreign. But if you take a look at the reference I was just referring to, this will start to make more sense. Where ID is referenced with this sort of hash symbol here. And there's other wildcards like an asterisk can be used to select all elements. So what I've done is I've said whenever any element using this asterisk selector that's a child of an element whose ID is site sections is clicked, do something. And in this particular case, what we're doing is using a custom HTML tag to alert the text of that particular thing that's being clicked. So when we go to actually preview this container, preview this configuration, and by the way, this is a great way to test out all the changes that you're making to your tagging before you go to publish things live. So if we preview, and then we go back to our test site over here and refresh it, we'll see our nice debug pane opening up. And we'll see nothing was fired yet because it's a fairly basic container. When I start to interact with things, they'll actually alert. And they're alerting, I don't know if you can read that, but that says section 6, that's the button I clicked on. And it'll dynamically pull in the button, the text for each button that I've clicked on, and you can see below that it's telling me that that has fired as well. So this is a great way to start to measure, for example, if we wanted to pull this button text into something like an event category or action or label within Google Analytics. It's a great way to do things at scale with very minimal setup within Google Tag Manager.
Thanks, Scott, for showing us how to use CSS selectors to fire tags to more dynamically measure things that are happening on your website. Thanks, guys.